This speech is to motivate, and many of you use this as an opportunity to bring up some very serious issues that come up in our young lives. But I'd like to take this opportunity to try and focus on something that's a little bit more lighthearted, but is to me just as important, and that is video games. I'd like to influence the way that you guys see this new media as it emerges, and embrace it as opposed to just sort of putting it on the back burner. Now, 56% of you, that's more than half, I know math, say it is not possible for a video game to be a wise use of one's time. Playing a video game cannot be a fulfilling, constructive experience. And it's easy to see where you guys get this notion. Because you look at the majority of popular video game characters, and for the most part, even if you really like these, you have to admit they're very juvenile. And if you're not convinced that this can be a good use of your time, Booger Man's not going to convince you. And what's worse is there is this huge macho male power fantasy sort of all throughout the industry. Oh, good Lord, what am I even looking at? Look at, I don't know what game this is, but all I can tell you is that it has a meter which measures how many gallons of blood are on screen. Enough said. And compound that with there are a lot of unrealistic, often sexist representations of women. There's a lot of fear-mongering war games going on all over the place. And then there's Grand Theft Auto, which pretty much embraces everything that you can complain about a video game. So let's take a step aside from that notion of what video games are and just take it down to the most simple interpretation of what the form is. I've put it down to interactive audio-visual simulation. That means that you have an input that pictures and sound come out, and it's interactive. It's a simulation. Even if you're doing something abstract, like making blocks fall and they disappear, it's a simulation of something. So, for those of you who said there were 2 points, that was that video games cannot be constructive or fulfilling. I'd like to start by trying to debunk the idea they can't be constructive. The input methods themselves can be constructive and educational. It's a common thing for musicians to make fun of people who play Guitar Hero because they can do all this crazy stuff, but they can't actually play an instrument. But there's actually a program called Rocksmith where you plug a real functional guitar into a computer and it gives you this dynamic tutoring program. So you would learn constructively how to play the guitar through what is a video game. I didn't realize this until I actually was writing this speech. Rosetta Stone, the program that immerses you in a language learning environment, by all the criteria of a video game, it fits that. Rosetta Stone technically is a video game by the form that I define. Maybe you guys learned how to type using Mavis Beacon when you're in junior high school. Personally, I learned how to type using the typing of the dead, so typing was a lot cooler to me. I got to type touch my waddle. I don't know why. And I'm sure you guys, a lot of you remember the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail, well, congratulations, you had a constructive experience. It taught you a lot about our nation's geography, socio-political history, and you acquired some resource management skills in there for good measure through this dynamic sort of experience. So going back to the poll that I had, you guys put video games at dead last in terms of legitimacy of different media. That's the source you want. And so I'd like to, for a moment, focus on what exactly these things are. These are visual medium. This is a textual literature medium. This is a sonic medium paired with sort of this combination of visual and musical medium, dance. And then you have video games. And something I'd like to point out, I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Richard Wagner had an idea of the Gesamtkunstwerk. That is an idea of an all-embracing art form. This goes back to the 19th century. He was a hugely influential composer. And he had the idea in an essay titled Art and Revolution, as well as the Artwork of the Future. And he uses these terms to describe the synthesis of music, theater, visual art, and dance. And by my definition, if you think that Richard Wagner, this fantastic, influential composer who fulfilled many people, was going for this synthesis of arts, I think that video games fulfill all of those things. Particularly dance. You are the one who is inputting these things. You are dancing, and the show can't go on without you. So there is also a concept that's more modern called media convergence. And this is the idea, if any one of you has looked down at your lap at a screen, you've proven my point here. A lot of the media that we have are converging into singular forms. So your smartphone is basically a crowning achievement of media convergence. And games themselves are as well. They are a combination of all these different media in one. And also they include you in the action. You're not just being passive. To quote Henry Jenkins, a scholar and professor at USC, just as we would not traditionally assume that someone is literate if they can read but not write, we should not assume that someone possesses media literacy if they can consume but not express themselves. So you seek what you can express yourself through. Just go for the most direct way of communicating. We don't need to put media on the back burner. Thank you. So I'm going to give you some examples of experiences in video games that were, to me, fulfilling, that were fascinating uses of the medium. This is a game called Res, and once again, I'm going back to synesthesia. It's a pet topic of mine. What this game tried to do in its sequel, Child of Eden, which came out, I think, a decade later, what it tried to do was take a dynamic visual representation of sound in the form of colors and shapes and textures all throughout culture and biology as it developed in order to create this experience in which the things that you do create both music and sound. And it's trying to dynamically engage you in order to produce a synesthetic experience. This was actually in development titled the K Project as an homage to Vasily Kandinsky. Moving on, we have a game called Ikaruga, which is Japanese for spotted dove. And this is supposed to be a dynamic, interactive representation of what it would be like to attain righteousness in Taoism. Basically what you're doing is you're switching between light and dark energy in order to achieve a middle path through your life. And it's designed to be extremely, excruciatingly difficult to mirror the difficulty of actually attaining righteousness in Taoism. So you're getting an idea of a different culture through the dynamic media that are video games. Here is another one. This was right when video games were able to sort of achieve a level of hyper-realism. Doesn't look like hyper-realistic to us now, but at the time it was. And they were trying to just, in a way like Rosetta Stone with language, they tried to do the same thing with culture. They tried to immerse the players in Japan and China during a time in which these nations were undergoing these vast cultural changes. So it's this juxtaposition of old world mythology and architecture within the trappings of Western modernism. You're getting to dynamically understand these things. And this is the weirdest thing. Okay, a game that I actually had this when I was 10. I got nightmares from it. It's a game where you put a microphone into the back of your controller and you talk to a fish with the face of a man. Okay, and the whole idea of this game was to try and give you an environment and a situation in which you are extremely alienated. Obviously, probably all of you are really weirded out just looking at this. Imagine having a conversation with it. The point that Yu Saito, the person who designed this game, was trying to get across was that through communication, we can understand anyone or anything better. We do not have to be limited. And actually, there's a point in which it asks you if you think that it exists. And if you say no, it has an existential crisis. And it's one of those interesting things, kind of recreating a life through this medium that answers to you. You can hurt its feelings. And it can say things back. It says, you know, I don't care that you don't think I exist. I think, therefore I am. Then I'll ask you to feed you, or feed him. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say, or emphasize, that video games are a form of communication, like any other medium. There is, despite its reputation that it's garnered through some pretty poor content and uses of the form itself is extremely fascinating, and I would implore you all, even if you don't like to spend the time, you're too busy to play video games, to try and see it for exactly what it is. It is a new medium. It is a Gesamtkunstwerk. It's very interesting. And keep in mind, if you don't think that video games are a legitimate form of communication, I've just been standing up here making grunting and hissing noises, breathing through teeth, tongue, and lips, and you guys are interpreting it as having meaning. So why not something that embraces all the forms of media up to this point? So here's my call to arms for this speech. Embrace what speaks to you, no matter how strange it is or how geeky it may seem to be. What matters is that you are touched, you are moved, and that someone is able to speak to you. The end.